Writing is preeminently the technology of cyborgs, etched surfaces of the late 20th century. Cyborg politics is the struggle for language and the struggle against perfect communication, against the one code that translates all meaning perfectly, the central dogma of phallogocentrism. That is why cyborg politics insist on noise and advocate pollution, rejoicing in the illegitimate fusions of animal and machine. These are the couplings which make man and woman so problematic, subverting the structure of desire, the force imagined to generate language and gender, and so subverting the structure and modes of reproduction of Western identity, of nature and culture, of mirror and eye, slave and master, body and mind. We did not originally choose to be cyborgs, but choice grounds a liberal politics and epistemology that imagines the reproduction of individuals before the wider replications of texts. From the perspective of cyborgs, freed of the need to ground politics in our privileged position of the oppression that incorporates all other dominations, the innocence of the merely violated, the ground of those closer to nature, we can see powerful possibilities. Feminisms and Marxisms have run aground on Western epistemological imperatives to construct a revolutionary subject from the perspective of a hierarchy of oppressions and/or a latent position of moral superiority, innocence, and greater closeness to nature. With no available original dream of a common language or original symbiosis, promising protection from hostile masculine separation, but written into the play of a text that has no finally privileged reading or salvation history, to recognize oneself as fully implicated in the world frees us of the need to root politics in identification, vanguard parties, purity, and mothering. Stripped of identity, the bastard race teaches about the power of the margins and the importance of a mother like Malinche. Women of color have transformed her from the evil mother of masculinist fear into the originally literate mother who teaches survival. This is not just literary deconstruction, but liminal transformation. Every story that begins with original innocence and privileges the return to wholeness imagines the drama of life to be individuation, separation, the birth of the self, the tragedy of autonomy, the fall into writing, alienation, i.e., war, tempered by imaginary respite in the bosom of the other. These plots are ruled by a reproductive politics, rebirth without flaw, perfection, abstraction. In this plot, women are imagined either better or worse off, but all agree they have less selfhood, weaker individuation, more fusion to the oral, to mother, less at stake in masculine autonomy. But there is another route to having less at stake in masculine autonomy, a route that does not pass through woman, primitive, zero, the mirror stage, and its imaginary. It passes through women and other present tense, illegitimate cyborgs, not of woman born, who refuse the ideological resources of victimization so as to have a real life. These cyborgs are the people who refuse to disappear on cue, no matter how many times a Western commentator remarks on the sad passing of another primitive, another organic group done in by Western technology, by writing. These real-life cyborgs, e.g. the Southeast Asian village women workers in Japanese and U.S. electronics firms, described by Ewa Ong, are actively rewriting the texts of their bodies and societies. Survival is the stakes in this play of readings. To recapitulate, certain dualisms have been persistent in Western traditions. They have all been systemic to the logics and practices of domination of women, people of color, nature, workers, animals, in short, domination of all constituted as others, whose task is to mirror the self. Chief among these troubling dualisms are self-other, mind-body, culture, nature, male, female, civilized, primitive, reality, appearance, whole, part, agent, resource, maker, made, active, passive, right, wrong, truth, illusion, total, partial, God, man. The self is the one who is not dominated, who knows that by the service of the other. The other is the one who holds the future, who knows that by the experience of domination, which gives the lie to the autonomy of the self. To be one is to be autonomous, to be powerful, to be God, but to be one is to be an illusion, and so to be involved in a dialectic of apocalypse with the other. Yet to be other is to be multiple, without clear boundary, frayed, insubstantial. One is too few, but two are too many. High-tech culture challenges these dualisms in intriguing ways. It is not clear who makes and who is made in the relation between human and machine. It is not clear what is mind and what body in machines that resolve into coding practices. Insofar as we know ourselves in both formal discourse, e.g. biology, and in daily practice, e.g. the homework economy in the integrated circuit, we find ourselves to be cyborgs, hybrids, mosaics, chimeras. Biological organisms have become biotic systems, communications devices like others. There is no fundamental ontological separation in our formal knowledge of machine and organism, of technical and organic. One consequence is that our sense of connection to our tools is heightened. The trance state experienced by many computer users has become a staple of science fiction film and cultural jokes. Perhaps paraplegics and other severely handicapped people can, and sometimes do, have the most intense experiences of complex hybridization with other communication devices. Anne McCaffrey's The Ship Who Sang explored the consciousness of a cyborg, hybrid of girl's brain and complex machinery, formed after the birth of a severely handicapped child. Gender, sexuality, embodiment, skill, all were reconstituted in the story. Why should our bodies end at the skin, or include at best other beings encapsulated by skin? From the 17th century till now, machines could be animated, given ghostly souls to make them speak or move or to account for their orderly development and mental capacities. Or organisms could be mechanized, reduced to body understood as resource of mind. These machine-organism relationships are obsolete, unnecessary. For us, in imagination and in other practice, machines can be prosthetic devices, intimate components, friendly selves. We don't need organic holism to give impermeable wholeness, the total woman and her feminist variants, mutants. Let me conclude this point by a very partial reading of the logic of the cyborg monsters of my second group of texts, feminist science fiction. The cyborgs populating feminist science fiction make very problematic the statuses of man or woman, human, artifact, member of a race, individual identity, or body. Katie King clarifies how pleasure in reading these fictions is not largely based on identification. Students facing Joanna Russ for the first time, students who have learned to take modernist writers like James Joyce or Virginia Woolf without flinching, do not know what to make of the adventures of Alex or the female man, where characters refuse the reader's search for innocent wholeness while granting the wish for heroic quests, exuberant eroticism, and serious politics. The female man is the story of 4 versions of one genotype, all of whom meet, but even taken together do not make a whole, resolve the dilemmas of violent moral action, nor remove the growing scandal of gender. The feminist science fiction of Samuel Delany, especially tales of Nevrion, mocks stories of origin by redoing the Neolithic revolution, replaying the founding moves of Western civilization to subvert their plausibility. James Tiptree, Jr., an author whose fiction was regarded as particularly manly until her true gender was revealed, tells tales of reproduction based on non-mammalian technologies like alternation of generations or male brood pouches and male nurturing. John Varley constructs a supreme cyborg in his arch-feminist exploration of Gaia, a mad goddess planet trickster old woman technological device on whose surface an extraordinary array of post-cyborg symbioses are spawned. Octavia Butler writes of an African sorceress pitting her powers of transformation against the genetic manipulations of her rival, Wild Seed. Of time warps that bring a modern U.S. black woman into slavery where her actions in relation to her white master ancestor determine the possibility of her own birth, Kindred. And of the illegitimate insights into identity and community of an adopted cross-species child who came to know the enemy as self, Survivor. Because it is particularly rich in boundary transgressions, Vonda McIntyre's Superluminal can close this truncated catalog of promising monsters who help redefine the pleasures and politics of embodiment and feminist writing. In a fiction where no character is simply human, human status is highly problematic. Orca, a genetically altered diver, can speak with killer whales and survive deep ocean conditions, but she longs to explore space as a pilot, necessitating bionic implants jeopardizing her kinship with the divers and cetaceans. Transformations are affected by virus vectors carrying a new developmental code, by transplant surgery, by implants of microelectronic devices, by analog doubles, and other means. Linnea becomes a pilot by accepting a heart implant and a host of other alterations, allowing survival in transit at speeds exceeding that of light. Radu Dracul survives a virus-caused plague on his outer world planet to find himself with a time sense that changes the boundaries of spatial perception for the whole species. All the characters explore the limits of language, the dream of communicating experience, and the necessity of limitation, partiality, and intimacy even in this world of protein transformation and connection. Monsters have always defined the limits of community in Western imaginations. The centaurs and Amazons of ancient Greece established the limits of the centered polis of the Greek male human by their disruption of marriage and boundary pollutions of the warrior with animality and woman. Unseparated twins and hermaphrodites were the confused human material in early modern France who grounded discourse on the natural and supernatural, medical and legal, portents and diseases, all crucial to establishing modern identity. The evolutionary and behavioral sciences of monkeys and apes have marked the multiple boundaries of late 20th century industrial identities. Cyborg monsters in feminist science fiction define quite different political possibilities and limits from those proposed by the mundane fiction of man and woman. There are several consequences to taking seriously the imagery of cyborgs as other than our enemies. Our bodies, ourselves. Bodies are maps of power and identity. Cyborgs are no exceptions. A cyborg body is not innocent. It was not born in a garden. It does not seek unitary identity and so generate antagonistic dualisms without end, or until the world ends. It takes irony for granted. One is too few, and two is the only one possibility. One is too few, and two is only one possibility. Intense pleasure in skill, machine skill, ceases to be a sin, but an aspect of embodiment. The machine is not an it to be animated, worshipped, and dominated. The machine is us, our processes, an aspect of our embodiment. We can be responsible for machines. They do not dominate or threaten us. We are responsible for boundaries. We are they. Up until now, once upon a time, female embodiment seemed to be given, organic, necessary. and female embodiment seemed to mean skill in mothering and its metaphoric extensions. Only by being out of place could we take intense pleasure in machines, and then with excuses that this was organic activity after all, appropriate to females. Cyborgs might consider more seriously the partial, fluid, sometimes aspect of sex and sexual embodiment. Gender might not be global identity after all. The ideologically charged question of what counts as daily activity, as experience, can be approached by exploiting the cyborg image. Feminists have recently claimed that women are given to dailiness, that women more than men somehow sustain daily life, and so have a privileged epistemological position potentially. There is a compelling aspect to this claim, one that makes visible unvalued female activity and names it as the ground of life. But the ground of life? What about all the ignorance of women, all the exclusions and failures of knowledge and skill? What about men's access to daily competence, to knowing how to build things, to take them apart, to play? What about other embodiments? Cyborg gender is a local possibility, taking a global vengeance. Race, gender, and capital require a cyborg theory of wholes and parts. There is no drive in cyborgs to produce total theory, but there is an intimate experience of boundaries, their construction, and deconstruction. There is a myth system waiting to become a political language, to ground one way of looking at science and technology and challenging the informatics of domination. One last image. Organisms and organismic, holistic politics depend on metaphors of rebirth, an invariable call on the resources of reproductive sex. I would suggest that cyborgs have more to do with regeneration and are suspicious of the reproductive matrix and of most birthing. For salamanders, regeneration after injury, such as the loss of a limb, involves regrowth of structure and restoration of function with the constant possibility of twinning or other odd topographical productions at the site of former injury. The regrown limb can be monstrous, duplicated, potent. We have all been injured, profoundly. We require regeneration, not rebirth, and the possibilities for our reconstitution include the utopian dream of the hope for a monstrous world without gender. Cyborg imagery can help express two crucial arguments in this essay. 1. The production of universal, totalizing theory is a major mistake that misses most of reality, probably always, but certainly now. 2. Taking responsibility for the social relations of science and technology means refusing an anti-science metaphysics, a demonology of technology, and so means embracing the skillful task of reconstructing the boundaries of daily life in partial connection with others, in communication with all of our parts. It is not just that science and technology are possible means of great human satisfaction, as well as a matrix of complex dominations. Cyborg imagery can suggest a way out of the maze of dualisms in which we have explained our bodies and our tools to ourselves. This is a dream not of a common language, but of a powerful infidel heteroglossia. It is an imagination of a feminist speaking in tongues to strike fear into the circuits of the super savers of the new right. It means both building and destroying machines, identities, categories, relationships, spaces, stories. Though both are bound in the spiral dance, I would rather be a cyborg than a goddess.